Good morning. Happy October. And our theme is the power of personal storytelling. So I'm going to tell you a story today that many of you are very familiar with. It's a familiar story. But you know, the power of a good story is not that it's new and different. Sometimes the best stories are the ones that you know how they're going to turn out. But it's in the retelling of the story that we get familiar with its depth and its meaning in our own lives. And so if you're here as a guest for a first time, you have an opportunity to peek into our culture, because once a year we do some housekeeping, some maintenance. We look in and talk about this topic, the story of our center. You heard some of it articulated when Jennifer Mann said she felt like she came home. She feels at home at the center. So many people tell me that story, that somewhere along their journey with the center, they get that experience like they came home. They came home to their spiritual center. I loved how Lionel, which is our practitioner on duty, Brenda's son, talked about it. He takes the family with him wherever he goes. I remember when he was a baby, I used to carry that boy in my arms, and now he's talking about this community that he carries with him wherever he goes. So, I felt like I had come to the first time I walked into a Center for Spiritual Living. 28 years ago, I stumbled into the Burbank Center for Spiritual Living, and I felt like I had come home. But don't you know, my story didn't really begin there. No story really has a true beginning point. There isn't a once upon a time, right? It begins like the story of this center. It begins literally in thousands of different personal stories that converge here. Like the story of your personal journey and what it took for you to be here today. And it could have started with an invitation by a friend to come, or a repeated invitation by a friend. Or it could have been that you came here because of another event, or you came here with a broken heart trying to look for help in understanding something that was very difficult in your life. Or it could be that you drove past the sign so many times that eventually you had to come and see what was going on over here. Or it could have been coincidental and you meant to go somewhere else. Or perhaps you were looking for a date and you came here and you know, whatever gets you here, that's good for me. The how your journey got here is part of the story of the Center for Spiritual Living. So if you are here today, the decisions, the events, the conflicts, the hopes, the dreams of your story are all part of our story. So right now we're experiencing a moment that is the result of multiple converging causes in this moment. How holy is that? Amazing. How did we get here? Well, how did Christopher Fritchie, our music director, get here? There's a story. I remember. He's part of the story. Several years ago, many years ago, he came with his then partner, and they sat right back over there. And his partner brought Chris to the service. And at that time, I was growing my hair for Locks for Love, and I had a mullet down to here. And Christopher came to the service, and he said to his partner, "I love the place, but honestly, I can't listen to that hair." And we met later that very same day at a social event, and we started talking. We became fast friends, and literally we haven't stopped talking for all of those years. And there came a point, once upon a time, when our then music director, you remember Linda Webb Kakaba, whose music we sang today, yes. And she became ill. She became so ill that she wasn't able to work any longer. And it was a very tender time for us. It was a rough time for us. And when she could no longer work, I remember calling up my friends, and Chris was one of them. He's a musician. I said, "You are going to have to help us, help me through this very tender time, you know." And he had recently stepped down from a professional career, a performing career with Chanticleer. He had sung all over the world. Did you know that he has 2 Grammys? Just by the way. Yeah. Yeah. So he said, yes, I'll help you. And he was really the perfect person to help us because he wasn't looking to be in the limelight. He wasn't looking for the spotlight. He wasn't really looking for a job right there and then. And he was so perfect because he was able to hold that container for us in our brokenheartedness. And he was amazing because we were broken. Our hearts were broken because of Linda. And people would go to Chris and say to him, you're not Linda. Yeah, and I don't like your music, and I miss Linda's music, and I wish you weren't here. There were, out of our brokenheartedness, a lot of that was transferred onto him. And at some point, as he was helping me, he said, I just realized this is actually a real job. I mean, it's a real job with a salary. It's even got an office. And I said, yeah, it is. And he said, I want that job. And I went, but we're friends, So we made a pact, and we said, we'll give it a year. We'll give it a year, and then we'll just have a real honest conversation with each other to see if it's going to get in the way of our friendship, because that's more important than a job. And here we are, some 7 years later, with one of the most respected music programs in Centers for Spiritual Living, a community-centric, volunteer-based, would you agree with me if I said that we have an extraordinarily amazing music program? Yeah. It's like today with Gypsy Soul. I mean, that's stupid good. It's so good. It's amazing. And remember 2 weeks ago, the Italian who wasn't crying you never know what you're going to get here. It could be bluegrass, it could be jazz, it could be this, it could be classical music, and it's rich and diverse and high quality. And he strives to make sure that the music is thematically coherent with the message so that we can have the deepest heart-opening experience, because don't you know, music is so powerful. It has the ability to go places in us that words alone cannot go. Right? And so people are more likely to remember the music experience than they are to remember what the preacher said. Which is why I will now sing the rest of the message. I wasn't expecting that. But a music program can't exist in a vacuum. There has to be a container, a facility, sound, technicians, people, staff. Oh my gosh, the logistics of making all of this happen. And do you know that literally thousands of feet march through these halls and passages every single week? And somebody has to keep an eye on that. Do you know the commitment to cleanliness and attention and schedules and logistics and planning, all so that it can appear to happen magically, seamlessly, clean and beautiful, to create the space that we can say, I think I've come home. Amazing. I mean, would you agree with me if I said we have got a first-class operation here with clean, amazing bathrooms and skill sets, invisible, integrated professionalism? And not only that, our facility houses an education program that is the jewel of our movement. I don't know that there is another center that offers the level of adult education that we offer for 3 semesters on an ongoing basis all the time. People have told me that coming to a class here, for some, it was the turning point in their life. I mean, they come for all different reasons for education. Some come just because they're curious, they're seekers, they're spiritual refugees. Some come because there's something so difficult in their life, they're trying to understand it and find a framework, a spiritual framework within which to integrate it. Some come for comfort, some come for company, some come for community. And people tell me that they have sometimes met lifelong friends in those classes. It doesn't surprise me, because part of our mission is to provide spiritual education. So it doesn't surprise me that it is met with such appreciation. And the atmosphere here during the week, because of the classes and the staff and the commitment, is one of learning and connection. It's exciting. It's very exciting. I remember when I arrived here 20 years ago, when I first got here, I was excited. I loved this place. And I leaned right into it, and I was speaking every single Sunday, and I was speaking every single Wednesday night, and I was teaching 2 classes a week every single week. And I was also, at those days, counseling people on a one-on-one basis. And I knew that train was going to crash. Right? You can feel, do you know when you don't pay attention and you can feel it rising up and you think you are Superman, woman? You think you can manage it, but you can feel it. And I remember noticing the moment when I had to take a month off. I had to. But I was so afraid. I was afraid that the church would collapse. Really? You know why? It's because people, I had heard them, they would say to me in a conspiratorial way, "Oh, Edward, I don't come unless I know you're speaking." Which on one hand is very flattering. On the other hand, it's terrifying. Because in those days, if people weren't in the room, their money also wasn't in the room. Oh, the anxiety of the pressure of thinking the success of so many people's salary and the existence of a center rested on me coming to the center every single week was too much. And we would experience a dramatic drop in revenue when I wasn't speaking. And I knew that couldn't carry on. I knew it. Because that's not community. That's the Edward show. It wasn't healthy for us, and it wasn't healthy for me, and I had to go on vacation. And I had to trust that if I went, that the community would be strong enough. I had to trust that there was something here that was real enough for the community to value enough that they cared to have it exist, survive for the future. So we talked about it. We discussed it. We discussed one of the things that face spiritual communities everywhere, and it's this. Who supports this place when you're not here? Or who supports this place so it can be here when you drop in? And right at that time, that's when we learned about the value of making a commitment to keeping the doors open, whether or not we were actually in the room. 16 years ago, that change happened. We had a change in culture. That's when we learned how to start mailing in our weekly contribution, even when we couldn't be here. Oh, and that changed things. With that order and that commitment and that dependability in play, we could breathe, we could relax, and we could turn to our true focus of spiritual living and not fundraising. So we didn't have to speak about it every single week and talk about contribution. No, we could talk about our message that there is a power in the universe greater than you are and that you can use it to bring wholeness and freshness and direction into your life. It's difficult to talk about that vision when your finances are not in order. So we had to get in order. And then I became confident and I thought, it's time for me to have a sabbatical. And I remember about 7 years ago, I said, I've been here a long, long time. I'm going to go on a sabbatical for 3 months. And I had to have the conversation again with the community. I said, if I come back from sabbatical and attendance has plummeted and revenue has plummeted, then I will know that is a sure sign that I've overstayed my welcome, that I've taught you wrong, that I've taught you it's about me. And off I went on vacation, on sabbatical. And the center thrived. Revenue went up. I must admit I was a little disturbed. I thought... No, I wasn't. I was thrilled to see that level of depth and maturity come into play. One of our past presidents, Reed Dickinson, who is staffing the table outside at the giving intention table, he started to come to the center when Reverend Joyce Dufalo, the assistant, was standing in place as senior minister during those 3 months. And he was enjoying the program so much. He had never met me, and then he kept on hearing this talk about this Edward who was coming back, and he leaned over to his wife and said, I sure hope he doesn't come and ruin everything, because I'm really enjoying this. And what we learned about that is that actually it is possible to have mature, frank conversations about how to support a place that has tremendous value in your life in a consistent, identifiable, generous way, whether you are present or not, simply because it means much, so very much to you. And as a result of successfully navigating through this, we became role models for other centers, for other ministers who had been in the pulpit for 25, 30 years to have their first sabbaticals. We started to make the way for people to have a right relationship with their own center, to own it. Now I get it that there are people here who have no jobs and no income, for whom even $1 would be a stretch. I understand that, and I want you to know that you are absolutely welcome here. In fact, it's our job to pray with you, to work with you, to spiritually support you in every way possible so that you can have what you want, have the structures in your life come into wholeness. You're invited to use every resource that is available here until you come into that richness. And I know, I get it, there are people here who have filled in a giving intention form every single year since we began it, who self-motivate themselves to stretch in the way that suits their own giving. I'm so grateful for that. It's amazing. And also I know that there are people here who have not yet stepped into that closer relationship. And that's what I want to talk to. I want to invite you into a closer relationship. I'm not fond of comparison, but I'm going to use it now, because I want to invite you to think about what a movie costs and compare the content of the movie to the value of what you get here, because I think there's something there to consider the relative value of the things we're willing to pay for. Recently, I posted on Facebook the question asking people, who are your favorite guest speakers at the center? And the list came out. David Bruner, Joe Hooper, David Alt, Kathy Ann Lewis, Cynthia James, Deborah Johnson, Chris Michaels, and on and on. And it's one of our strengths that you will, every single month, receive the message from a different voice. That is very healthy. And rather than plan to miss it, plan to be disturbed by it. Wouldn't you agree with me if I said that we have an amazing offering of talented, gifted speakers to enjoy every single month? And every single week for the past 60 years without interruption for 1 hour every Sunday, and currently at a time, a selection of one of 3 services, you can come and be immersed in prayer, meditation, music, beauty. And not only that, we don't charge an entrance fee, so that anyone can come and enjoy it. We just passed the basket in a kind of low-key, non-pressure offering collection so that everyone can participate at whatever level feels correct for them. That's awesome. And not only that, we give a portion of our income to 12 non-profit organizations in our community that are nominated by you, and also to our home office. And this year's nonprofit organizations, they've been selected from your nominations. They're on a piece of paper in the social hall if you want to see what we selected from your suggestions. And I remember once the CEO of a nonprofit organization that we had selected was standing right here. And she told the story of how her organization ran into difficult times. And they got to the point they were out of money. And they were getting ready to literally close the doors. And our modest check arrived in the mail. And when they opened it, it was like opening a window where a breath of fresh air came in. And it gave them the courage and the wherewithal to hope and to keep on keeping on. And they kept on keeping on. And they eventually received a grant. And she told the story about how that contribution made the difference to their survival. I will never forget that. And one of our congregants told me what a joy it is, she says, to be able to contribute to the Center for Spiritual Living. Because then when people solicit for contributions from her, she says, I already give to 12 nonprofit organizations through my spiritual organization. Would you agree with me that it is awesome good to belong to a community that contributes a step towards making this a better place for everyone in a very practical way? This is worth supporting. This is worth helping. This is worth contributing to. And I don't take nearly enough time to tell you how committed and how awesome your staff is to producing a seriously quality experience for you. Now, the whole world, our whole society is going through economic challenges, not just us. Nobody's getting raises out there in the world, not just us. And really, our salaries are not competitive with the corporate world. And yet, we've never lost a single staff member because of that, because of no raises and because of the middle range of salaries, because the staff people here, almost every one of them is a member by their own free will, and almost every one of them has submitted a giving intention because they are you and me. They are here just probably like you are, compelled by a vision of a world that works for everyone, in which there is generous and ongoing sharing of resources, in which there is an emphasis on art and aesthetics, in which forgiveness is the norm. They are compelled by the same thing that we are compelled by. And when they work here, they work for 5, 10, 15, 20 years because they want to be here like you do. Now, the story of my giving starts a long, long time ago, once upon a time in a land far away, when my mother taught me how to give. She taught me that giving was the secret to everything, that giving was the power, that giving was how we connected and had value in the world. I learned it from my mother. And yet, I had a block when it came to giving to church. Even at that Burbank Center for Spiritual Living, if I go to that as a beginning point, I found myself with my habit of withholding as the basket came around on Sundays, dropping change in just to get it done, just get over it, or skip out. But something happened that changed everything. The minister one day got up and she asked us, and I felt like she was talking right to me. She asked us to consider what the monetary value of our experience of the center would be in a dollar amount. And I was so turned off. I stopped giving immediately. I was offended that she should bring money into the service. I mean, I can't explain it. It doesn't make a lick of sense. See, but in my mind, I had separated money, which was crass, from spirituality, which was holy. Look, I wanted a first-class experience. I wanted an excellent message. I wanted good, classy music, or I'd gossip about it, and I wanted a clean, top-notch environment, and I wanted it for free. And maybe it was because the place looked so prosperous when I walked into the Burbank Center for Spiritual Living. I didn't think they needed anything. I thought they had it all. I thought they were thriving, and since they were thriving, they should serve the people. A turning point happened for me when, in a private conversation, as we were discussing this, she said to me, "Edward, who do you think is paying for this?" You see, I thought someone was. It just never occurred to me that might be me. And for the first time in my life, I really got the connection. I started to understand what I was getting for $1 a week. It blew my mind, and I started to give more regularly and a little more generously, not completely committed yet. It was still kind of haphazard. Whenever I was there, I would give. Or even worse, if I was inspired, I would give. No inspiration, no cash. You see, you do know the story. Even when I went through ministerial school, I still had a withholding from it. Even when I took the job as the senior minister of the center, I still had a withholding in my heart. And I'm going to tell you next week the story of how I got to be the minister of the center. It's nothing short of a miracle, if not the most comical story you'll ever hear. But anyway, even when I got here and we were in such debt, we couldn't contribute to a community organization. We couldn't even support our home office. We couldn't even pay our bills. So we sat down, 20 years ago, and we discussed the most important thing I knew about giving, even though I wasn't practicing it. Right? You know that story. We sat down and we talked about it. The most important thing I know about it is that if you don't have a giving practice, you will have a block in the flow of your abundance. And so we knew we had to start giving. So we started. First thing we did on Monday morning was count up the offering. And then we took 0.5% of it and committed to contribute that. Because that's all we could do with safety. We had other obligations, but we knew we had to start somewhere. And then Tuesday, we would go about calling our creditors and ask them, would you take partial payment for this? See, what we were doing was we were taking responsibility for our finances. We were owning the whole mess, and we were standing in it, and we were bringing order into it. And then we would follow that up. On Wednesday, we would start writing thank you notes to every single person who gave us anything, because we had been taught, in Science of Mind classes, we had been taught to always celebrate what you have and not always look at what you don't have. We'd been taught to do something to bring order into play and to trust that, to trust the machinery of order. We were bringing order into play. And we had been taught that gratitude is the lubricating power that moves the machinery of good. We'd been taught that, so we were practicing thinking of ourselves as being grateful and generous no matter what happened. And boy, did we have opportunities to practice what we preached. Right? Whew. And that was round about the time when I knew I had to make my own commitment. I had to step into giving. And 16 years ago, I did. I said, you can count on me. And every single week since then, you can check my record. There is a check from me every single week for 16 years, and it's more than 10% of my income. And I'll tell you, I don't mind sharing this with you, that I was audited by the IRS, and they said that the trigger, when I asked them about it, was that I was giving too much. I'll tell you something what happened. I grew out of that giving practice. I grew, and slowly over time we grew, because something started to happen at the center. An atmosphere of gratitude started to creep in and take over and change the culture and change the conversations. And we started to attract people who wanted to grow together, and a sense of mutual love and nourishment started to be present, and we made it through some of the toughest challenges and times. Tough challenges. We made it through challenges that have closed some centers down. We made it through. And here we are, together, ready to carry on carrying on, looking forward again to 2015 with an amazing theme, one truth, many paths. Awesome, with beautiful community-centric programs, Gourmets for Good, read about it, amazing. And looking forward to doing all of this with ease and grace and excellent on behalf of the community of people who call this place their spiritual home. And my friends, every single one of you who come to this center, listen to the radio or download the videos, is part of this community. And I'm asking you to take a look into your heart and examine the place that the center occupies, not only in your life, but in Sonoma County. And not only in Sonoma County, but in the world. And next week I will play a video for you from women in Spain who listen to our message. And then to take a step closer into a committed relationship with your center. And not only that, to support that relationship every single week or month according to your schedule with your contribution. And not only that, to take an even closer step and to fess up and to write down what it is you plan to give in 2015 so you can be counted on. You know, I know that sometimes a person can't give a single thing. It's okay. You're welcome here. And that there are other people here who give more so that all of us can be here. We pick it up together. We make it possible together. So I know sometimes people are guests. Sometimes they just drop in guests, and whenever they're here, they might drop something in, and that's wonderful. Accept that. But I'm inviting you to think of a deeper relationship. Now, I got to mention this month's book of the month, The Power of Personal Storytelling. It's awesome, and I'm reading it. The part assigned for this week is about listening being the telling difference, and in it the author tells the story of a supervisor he worked with, Harriet, who had the unfortunate habit of writing typewritten reprimands for the staff she worked with, supervisors. She would leave it on their chair. And he had this really awful, hard relationship with her. He could not really ever connect. But the turning point came for him when one day in a conversation with her, he suddenly witnessed her talking about something that was very, very important to her. And it took down all the barriers. Her supervising skill didn't change, but his experience of her did, because he had witnessed something that was very, very important to her. And in reading that, the first beautiful, important spiritual lesson rose up from the pages for me, and I was reminded again that healing and integration comes when an internal change comes, not when the world behaves itself. Right? And I'll tell you why this is a very important key to spiritual living for me. It is very, very important to me that you like me. Can you see how that is a referral to an external source? It is very, very important to me that no one is ever made to feel uncomfortable. Can you see how that is a referral to an external source? So much so is it important to me that I will avoid having this conversation about money at all costs, because I'm so sensitive to what people might think. But the good news is my inner healing is taking place. And slowly but surely I have come to a place today where I realize and understand it's my job to talk about this giving intention process of ours. Not just talk about it, but talk about it with pride. It's our culture. It's what we do. It sets us apart from other systems. It's one of the ways we invite each other into close, committed relationship with the center. I have no excuses anymore to make, but to say, I invite you to step in close, into a much closer, generous relationship with this place because you have made it. You have created it. And on some level, it is feeding you deeply. I love that. I love that we're in it together. And I invite you today to make that step. Let us take a breath in and exhale and enter into a moment of prayer in which we acknowledge that one power that is everywhere present by whatever name we call it. And suffice it to say that it is individual to each one of us, and that in our unique and diverse ways we express it beautifully and easily. Today I give thanks that that is true, that there is a creative genius at work in us, for the good of all. And so it is.